All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Mindful Player. We've got the crew together again, first time in a long time. So Ronnie here, Adam and Andy, the Hawaiian Punch. He's back. Great to see you, man.
Good to be back.
Yeah, we're excited. Again, we started doing these about a month ago, and it's just a lot of fun to be able to talk to these guys, and hopefully all of you out there benefit from it. So today we're going to talk about physical and mental maturity, and I think it's always a good conversation to have, especially from the mental aspect of it. But we'll start out talking about the physical part of it, and I think from my end of it, Adam, Andy, seeing kids at all different ages, it's amazing how every kid is on a different time frame, different steps, of how they develop. And it's been fun to watch kids when they're 10 or 11, and then when they're 16 and 17, and just how much growth they get. But I think that's a challenge with all of them. And, I've done a lot of talking to different people, and, you start seeing these higher level select teams, and, you look at an 11-year-old team and they've got 3 guys that are 6'3", and then you got 4 guys that are 6 foot. And it's just amazing how some of these kids grow so fast. But I think we're talking about a very small percentage of all the kids out there. And, what about those kids that are 5'6" or 5'2", and, it's just trying to figure out how to put the bat on a ball or throw a strike, so I think it's good to be able to talk to those kids as well and help them understand. So what do you guys have on physical maturity up to this point?
I mean, I just know that when I was about 12 years old, I started, you go from the small field to the big field. That was a big leap for me. And I remember getting thrown out from right field a couple times.
Yeah.
And I felt like first base was about a mile away. But, I had to be patient with myself to know that, hey, I'm going to get a shot. My body's going to grow, and there's some other kids that are about the same size as me, but there's the older kid, or not the older kids, but the bigger kids that are putting the balls into the gaps, and they're running and they're safe at first. But, it's a little discouraging, but physically you're going to develop. You're going to go through puberty. You're going to catch up eventually, right?
Yeah. Just got to be patient with it, right?
100%.
One thing I try to do with a lot of kids, and I just wrote a couple different things on how I try to evaluate, again, regardless of the size, the strength. And I think it's good for kids to be able to evaluate themselves. Obviously everybody's talking about arm velo now, and, how hard do you throw? But I think even for kids that are 10 and 11, I'll give you a good example. We've got a little 10-year-old that probably midsummer, he was throwing about 51 miles an hour. Well, he started working out with a speed and agility coach, and really started doing a lot of push-ups and things like that. And by the end of the fall, he was touching 60. So, pretty big little jump there for this kid, and he's a pretty good sized kid. But I was just proud of the fact that he, it wasn't crazy that he was doing, he's 10 years old. He wasn't weightlifting. He was just doing a lot of strength and agility stuff, and his body got better. And all of a sudden he started creating a little bit more arm strength and arm speed, and it was fun to watch. So, obviously foot speed, just being able to time kids, just to give them an idea of where they're at, regardless of the size, exit velocity. The one big thing that I talk to a lot of especially the young kids, is having them do a lot of push-ups and challenge themselves on a weekly basis. If you're going to commit to 1 week doing 25, the next week try to do 30, and just try to keep adding to it. And I think that'll be a good gauge for kids as well. So what do you guys got?
Yeah, I mean, we talked earlier about like the simple exercises, the movement preps, the stretching, the muscle activations, especially like a 10-year-old. We don't know exactly when the right time is to start lifting weights, but if you get on like a regimen, disciplined routine that incorporate physical activity like that, you talk about physical maturity, but that's more on the mental side too, the mental maturity of developing that routine from doing simple physical exercises. I think that is very powerful.
Oh yeah. Like I think too, like I know Adam, you're really big on kids playing other sports, right? And like developing more skills. So like, I think one of the most beneficial things with the young player is going to be just getting more agile, right? By getting the hand-eye coordination, all those types of things seem to me to be more important than, like, say, lifting weights, right?
Mhm.
So seems like that'd be really valuable.
Yeah, definitely. The athleticism that you get from playing different sports. And I'm seeing it now with my own kids. You know, my daughter's 7 and my son's 5, and I can see the different sports that we get them in. And they come back around and they play the sport that they were playing in the spring. And they're that much better because they played the fall and winter sports too. You know, it's just really neat to see how different sports develop that athleticism.
No doubt. You know, on that point, I remember, do you remember Sean Marone? The
Sean
strength
Marone?
and conditioning. coach?
Yeah, of course. For
You
Cincinnati.
know,
Yeah.
we were in instruction league or something one year, and I was asking him, I said, you know, what do you think benefits baseball players the most, other sports? He goes, you know, basketball, soccer, football, whatever. He said, but he said, start looking at all these kids out here. And you know, we had however many kids we had out there. And he said, you can tell. He said, I can tell what kids just played straight baseball. And I'm like, well, how can you tell? He said, they look like boxes. He said, they just look like boxes. And he said, but look at that kid. He played football and he played basketball and he was just a, you know, a gazelle, and all the different agility things that they were having him do. It just made it look so easy. So I think you guys, that's a great point. And, you know, we did a little camp with some of our teams the last couple of weeks. And I've got a guy who does a lot of the ladder stuff. Well, he was having these kids do, you know, all the different steps of ladders, but he was also throwing a tennis ball at them. And what a difference in the way these kids started to move, because obviously you're trying not to step on the ladder, and then there's a ball coming at you. So it's just, you just got to get coordinated. And I'm seeing 10-year-olds getting an idea of how they're moving. So it was kind of cool to see.
Ronnie, that reminds me of the comment you made last week, or the last time we were on, about stacking activities together. Like you're brushing your teeth, think of a positive thought, just like that activity. You're doing the ladder drill and there's a tennis ball coming at you. So stacking those activities to combine them is very powerful as well.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's get into the middle part of it. And I'm kind of anxious because I've been waiting to hear on it with this one with Andy. You know, we talk about mental maturity, you know, and the research that I was doing the last week, a lot of it is just, they talk a lot about the emotional maturity. So one of the definitions I've read was the ability to handle and assess situations without escalating them. You know, and I started thinking about myself. When did I feel like I grew, you know, from an emotional standpoint where I matured? And I think it was a simple fact that I learned to accept failure. And I think as a young kid, you know, I pout when I didn't do good. I struck out. I'm over there in the corner pouting. But once I learned to just say, you know what, I'm not trying to do that. It just happens. It's part of the game. Because I used to always think that everybody was laughing at me when I failed. But, you know, once I've kind of got over that hump, I think that was one of the biggest difference makers for me from a maturity standpoint, from emotional and just being able to understand how to control my mind.
Oh, yeah. So that kind of made me think of several different things, but the real valuable thing that I think we can take from that too, right, is when you were like pouting as a little kid, right? You struck out, you're all in the dugout, all unhappy, right? Where does that unhappiness come from, right? And it typically comes from the type of thoughts that you're having, right? So you're probably thinking like you said, everybody's laughing at me. Well, if I think that, like, yeah, I'm getting anybody that thinks that would probably be kind of sad because everybody thinks everyone's laughing at them, right? So I think I think what's difficult for kids is to recognize how their thinking really affects how their emotions are, right? So I know that through understanding and studying the mind, that most emotions, if not all, come from the way that you're thinking, right? So things happen to you every single day, right? Let's apply it to baseball. So you strike out, right? If your thought is, I'm going to get this guy next time, he's mine, right? How is that type of thought going to affect your emotion when you walk into the dugout? You're not going to be sad. You're not going to be frustrated. You're going to be like excited to bat again, right? If you strike out and your thought is something like, oh man, like I can't ever hit off this guy, right? how's that going to affect your emotion? You're probably going to be like sad. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be like pouty, right?
Yeah.
But if you understand that the way that you feel typically comes from the thoughts that you have, helps you understand that you have the control. And the control factor is the most empowering part for you. And I think for young players, it's just really difficult at times to recognize where your emotions come from. But I think even like what I just described with those examples, most like pretty much all youth players would be like, oh yeah, I totally get that. It's just in the heat of the moment, right? It's a lot easier said than done. Like Adam talks about, like when you're playing the game, it's a lot different than say coaching, right? Like it's hard, it is tough. But if you can start making those subtle adjustments at practice, right? You miss a ground ball. How do you think about it? You do it at practice, right? So if you miss the ground ball, oh, hey, the next one, I'm not letting go, getting through. Like I'm going to do everything in my power, right? And let's say it happens again, right? Well, what are you going to do? How are you going to, what type of thoughts are you going to create to help you best be successful? So that's what it comes down to.
Love it. I mean, I always wrestled with it as a ball player. I always wrestled with my emotions from day one until the end. It never stopped. Like I could like I knew where they were coming from. Like you want to win. You're so determined to do great, to be great. And I remember in San Diego, I mean, I'm whatever, 6-7 years in the major leagues now. Andy Green pulls me aside, my manager, and says, look we know how much you care, right? We know that you care, that you want to get on base for us, that you want to win. You don't have to show us. And right when he told me that, it was like a light bulb went on. And every time that I got out, I didn't show it. I just walked back to the dugout, head held high. My thoughts were held high. Like my thought process went from, oh man, I'm going to do the same thing again next time, to no, I'm going to get this guy next time. Just because of the way my body language was. And from somebody, a mentor, a great coach that told me, hey, we know how much you care. You don't have to show it. I thought it was really legit.
Yeah, sometimes we need reminders, right? Like we talk about this stuff all the time, and it sometimes you just need like somebody to tell you, hey, it's all good. You know, keep your head held high.
Right.
Don't worry about it. Be successful. And we know you care. Right.
Yeah.
And your thoughts, man, thoughts are so difficult to control, but we do have control. Right. And at times they don't get away from us, but that's when you have to bring it back in and realize, like, okay, it's not the things that happen to us that determine our emotions. It's how we think about those things that determine our emotions. And that it's so empowering for pretty much anyone in any given situation. This is something that it's one of the things that I first teach soldiers, especially the guys that are going to Ranger School or they're trying to become special forces, right? They're going to do this really, really hard task. And so it's one of the first things I teach them, like, hey, before we talk about anything, let's first give you a little bit of insight into how your brain works, right? So things happen to you. They happen to us every day. Usually our first one of the day is the alarm clock. And after those things happen to us, we have our thoughts, and our thoughts determine and drive or influence our emotions and how we act. So what do we have control over? We have control over our thoughts. And so it's such a empowering understanding. And I think some people don't realize that. They don't realize that they have all the control. And I think youth too, when they feel a lot of emotion within the game, which they don't realize that they have control over it. And I think empowering youth to recognize, like, hey, this is a little bit how your brain works. Things happen to you. You have your thoughts, and your thoughts are what drive your emotion, your reaction. Let's create thoughts that help you. So
Love it. Love it. So, the biggest thing that sticks out to me, because I think I was a lot like you, Rosie, but Andy, I got a question for you, because I think a lot of young kids are falling into this category. Adam was a pleaser. I was a pleaser. As a kid, you're trying to please your parents. So the pressure that Adam put on himself, okay, so how can we help kids understand that have that pleasing mentality to maybe redirect their thoughts with what you're talking about? Because I love it. Your thoughts lead to actions.
right. So I think when it comes to youth and like helping to motivate them most, I think like before the game, right? I think it's okay that you're like, oh, I want to do well for my team, right? Because I think that's an effective way of thinking. But when you're in the game and you're going to hit, and your thoughts are, I want to please my coach, I want to please my parents, like that is not going to be helpful for like 99% of all players, right? What's going to be helpful? It's going to be like something we've talked about all the time is see the ball out of the pitcher's hand, right? Seeing like hitting, getting, not even getting a hit, right? We don't even want to be thinking about getting a hit. We want to think about the being in the very moment. And so when it comes to kids, I think if you can help them to recognize, hey, when the game starts, all that matters is the game, right? Be in the moment with the pitcher, be in the moment while on base, be in the moment while in the field. Don't worry about me. Like if I was a parent and I would, well, I am a parent, but if my kids, when they were playing baseball, I would be like, hey, during the game, like, don't worry about me. You know what I mean? And I don't know if that's easier said than done, but yeah, it's a good question.
I love it. And I've had kids where after every pitch, they're looking at their parents. And you know what? One of them is a kid that I coached in high school. And I ended up telling him, I said, can you leave the game, please? And I said, because he's so wrapped up in trying to please you that he's forgetting what he's trying to accomplish out on the field. So he left for a while. And then all of a sudden, okay, this kid forgot. Basically, he didn't think his dad was there. All of a sudden, I'm like, hey, you got to come back and watch him now. And it was just a step that he took. So,
Ronnie,
I have another question.
Yeah,
go ahead, Adam.
No, you go. You got it.
I have another question because I wrote this down and this was a biggie for me, and I think along these thoughts, we talk about self-expectations. I think being realistic is very important for kids, but I think sometimes these kids maybe get swayed by mom and dad and they're not being malicious, but I think that the expectations get so high that these kids don't feel like they can reach them. And then they end up going, they're afraid to fail. They start becoming indecisive and they become hesitant. So what's something we can help kids with that? Because I've dealt with that a lot over the last year and a half.
Yeah. So if a kid feels like they are afraid to fail, right? So again, it kind of comes back to training youth how to think within the game, right? Because I think like outside of the game, like when you're at home, right? When you like whatever way of thinking is not, as long as it doesn't impact the game, right? And when it starts impacting the game and how they think within the game, that's when you're going to run into issues. And so, I mean, how do you train a kid how to think while playing? And I think it comes back to the fundamentals of what we've been talking about for the last, couple of years. And that's that when you're in the game, all that matters is seeing the ball when you're at bat, right? And I know that that's a difficult question to answer because it's like, well, if you're afraid to fear, like if that's or if you're afraid to hit, or you're afraid that you're not going to please your parents, or you're afraid of failure, and those are the type of thoughts that you're having during the game, like there's an issue there, right? And so that's why I keep bringing it back to teach your youth players how to think, and they should be thinking about the being in the moment at each step of the game, right? Because if I'm thinking about seeing the ball, like you're walking up to the plate, right? You're in the batter's box. If I'm thinking about my parents and pleasing them or whatever you're thinking about. You're not thinking about timing the ball. You're not in the moment with the game. Yeah. Right. So that's kind of tricky, because to me, if you are outside of the game thinking about those things and it's not affecting how you play, then it's not really an issue, unless it's an issue for that person, I guess. I don't know.
I think that's why
that's a great question.
I think that's why the mindful player process is so valuable. And that's why how we're helping kids right now off of this webinar with the content that we have, is that we teach them to reset. We teach them to breathe. We teach them their focus cue, and we teach them that they have to stick to that focus cue and have that courage. It's that process, that repetition over and over again. But that comes with mental maturity, though. I mean, that's not easy to do. I was trying to do it. I went golfing a couple of times out here because we had family visiting. I usually don't golf unless there's family out here. And I was using the mindful player process. You know, I would reset after every swing I took on the driving range. I would breathe. I would have my focus cue, and I trusted it. And I usually lose about 10 balls around. I'm not kidding. I can't hit it straight. I get that nice inside out swing, that baseball swing. But I only lost one ball.
Nice.
Because it was now 9 holes, you know, full disclosure. I only lost one ball because I stuck to the process. I didn't worry about crushing the ball and trying to outdrive my brother-in-laws, you know. Right. I was focused on the process, and that's what's going to help these players. Prevent them from caring about failing so much. Like showing, like Andy Green said, don't show us. It's okay. You don't need to show it. We know how you feel. So I think the process, sticking to a process, is essential.
No doubt. No doubt. You know, it's funny, over the last 3 weeks, a month, I've been having a lot of college kids and a couple of pro guys that come to hit. You know, and my big thing, every time a kid comes to hit, I want them to verbalize what they feel like they need to improve on, you know, and inevitably it all goes back to, I want to be consistent. Okay. What do you mean? Well, I want to be consistent. Well, be more specific. You want to be consistent with what? With your swing, you know, with your approach, with your mindset, you know, and I think it's hard for kids, but once you start trying to get these guys to specify exactly what we're talking about with that process of the mindful player, I think it's a lot easier to be able to get consistent, you know, and that I always talk about that first step, you know, as a hitter, when we talk timing, your load is going to be what you're going to try to be the most consistent with, because that's what's going to allow you to get your swing off the way you want. But it's so much starts way before that, you know. It's on deck, or it's in the hole. It's on deck. It's step into the batter's box and then being able to get into that mindset. So it's exciting to talk to kids like that, because they get it.
That's right, and it's a journey. I mean, for me, like, I really didn't do too much in high school. I didn't do too much mental preparation, or didn't really mature mentally until I got to college, and I kind of had to. I was kind of forced to slow the game down. And then from there, I just kind of exponentially grew really quick, because I actually started applying myself mentally, and the maturity just happened really quick because I was ready for it. You know, and I had a good mentors and a good support system and good resources to guide me and direct me of how to do it correctly. And that's what I think the maturity comes from. You know, it's about timing, like when to start doing it.
Right.
I mean, it's just like lifting. I say as early as you can, but
yeah.
Because Andy, you have a lot of young soldiers that you work with. I mean, there's probably like 17, 18-year-olds, right?
They're all at least 18, but those 18, are like brand new soldiers. So the ones I work with are usually in their 21 to 27.
Still, like, that frontal lobe hasn't developed yet.
Yeah. Those are the ones that are going to like Ranger school or trying to become special operations. And then I work with a lot of high ranking, like leadership within as well, because they're the ones that influence. The more information that they understand, the more they can pass it on. Right.
Right.
And I talk with them about the same things, just about Army stuff, right? Instead of baseball. And that's like kind of, I wanted to emphasize the difference between focusing on the process versus focusing on the outcome, right? And so in a baseball scenario, because I hear those terms kind of thrown around, like we got to focus on the process, and some people I think don't really understand what that means or how to articulate.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And focusing on the process means that when you are in the dugout, all of your energy is focused on the game, the scores, right? You're paying attention to what each hitter's doing, right? When you get to the go to hit, or you're on the on deck circle, like you're preparing yourself by being in the moment, looking at the pitcher, right? And Adam, you and Ronnie, you'll know a little more than I would about what you should actually be paying attention to, but that's focusing on the process, right? When you go to hit, you're focusing on seeing the ball into the bat, right? You're focusing on those type of things versus trying to get the hit, right? The hit is the outcome of focusing on the process. Because I think some youth players are like, I shouldn't be focusing on getting a hit. Like it kind of sounds foreign to them. Like actually, no, right? And that I learned with you guys, working with you guys a lot. You should be focused on seeing the ball as much as you can, right? And getting a hit and seeing the ball those are two different things, right? So if you can articulate that to young players, like, hey, this is what you should be thinking while hitting, I think gives them a lot more benefit than just saying like, hey, focus on the process. Because I think for some kids, they're like, what's that even mean? Like,
Right.
focus on the process, but I don't like, what's the difference, right?
That's a great point. Yeah, 100%.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, man. Well, I think we got a lot covered today. I enjoyed it. It's always fun listening to both of you guys. I hope our listeners are really benefiting from this. I mean, I wish I'd have known a lot of this stuff back 20, 30 years ago, because I feel like it might have helped me a little bit more, but oh, well, it is what it is. So, all right, man. Well, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. And get to see y'all here in a couple of weeks. So y'all take care.
All right. Thanks everybody for being on.
Thank
All
you.
right.